What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and a couple days ago I talked through my top 25 overall Dynasty rookie rankings, but that only went 10 wide receivers deep. So today we're going to take our time, go even deeper, and talk through my top 16 Dynasty rookie rankings through the lens of my prospect model. If you were following the channel in February or March and it seemed a little quiet and you were wondering where the videos were, I was knees deep in the spreadsheets making this new wide receiver model. So today we're going to show it off. I'm going to bring it to you guys. We're going to rank these 16 wide receivers, put them into tiers, plug them into the prospect model, and see what their player comps are so we can get a real range of outcomes, the ceiling and floor for each of these Dynasty rookie wide receivers. And also this video is so that when you're in the third round, fourth round, fifth round of your Dynasty rookie draft, and you're starting to look at names like Isaac Tesla, you can get a feel for what these players even are and what you can kind of expect their ceiling and floor to be in the NFL. So with all that being said, if you enjoy, leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and let's get straight into it. Now, of course, we got to break down the wide receiver model. Now, I will say this is going to be a Cliff Notes accelerated version. Okay, I'll link it up top. I went through it in a video a couple months ago where I just went, broke it all the way down, 20-minute breakdown. Today, it's just going to be really quick. Okay, so what the wide receiver model is, it's called the RS Grade 2.0 wide receiver model. RS grade, RS is just Ron Stewart, and it's a grade from 0 through 10 that correlates to a wide receiver's ability to score PPR points in their first 3 seasons. Now, what goes into the model is a film score. That is 43% of it. That's just based on Draft Capital and Lance Zierlein NFL.com draft grades. Then you have a breakout score. 19% of it is your production through your first 3 seasons. Then you have height-adjusted athleticism. That is a 15% input. That is just, are you big and are you fast? A separation score is 11% of the grade. That is just your contested target percentage over your entire career. Are you getting open, or are a lot of your routes ending up being contested targets, 50-50 ball situations, which when it is too high, like a J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, that is not a good thing. Then you have an efficiency score for 6% of the grade. That is just a composite of career passer rating when targeted, career PFF grade, and career yards per out run. Program quality, did you go to a good school? That's 4%. And then 2% for early declare. Did the NFL think that you need to declare early from your school and go straight to the NFL? And what that gives you is an RS grade from 0 through 10. And this is what it looks like when you sort the top 25 scores from 2017 through 2022. And the reason I do 2022 is so we have at least 3 years of data on these wide receivers. And to me, I think it's pretty good, right? You just sort by the best RS grade. You have Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, Jerry Jeudy, Garrett Wilson, Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle. Now, of course, it's not perfect, right? You have Henry Ruggs, you have Corey Davis in the elite tier, but any model that's perfect has something weird going on where there's probably overfitting and some, putting your hand on the levers and doing some manual stuff there. So I'm happy with how the model looks. You'll see there's a couple things going on, though. Projected points per game year 1 through 3. That is essentially reverse engineering the RS grade and spitting out a number that's like, what is your baseline projection for PPR output in your first 3 seasons? And then prospect tier. And that's what this is here, where based on your RS grade, you fall into a hit rate bucket. And the way that I sort of explain it is that this contextualizes the grades. Because if I tell you AJ Brown has an 8.66 RS grade, you're like, okay, cool. What does that mean? Well, this puts them into hit rate buckets, where if you have an 8.5 or better RS grade, you can expect that player to hit 14 points per game or better 85% of the time, and they average 13.3 points per game through their first 3 seasons. That's really good. So that's an elite wide receiver prospect, and it goes all the way down. So legendary, elite, gold, silver, bronze. Now, you're going to see that for the film score, we use Fitzgerald Spielberger draft trade value chart. And that's a much better use of draft capital than just raw picks. Because if you just did first pick, second pick, third pick, the difference between first and second overall is way different than 255th and 256th. So it's a better measure of draft capital. And then it's also a better baseline for what your model needs to beat, because this is all fancy, this is all cool, but if you're not beating draft capital, it doesn't mean anything. And I think that when you measure for if you're beating draft capital, it has to be versus a trade value chart or draft pick value chart to accurately kind of assess, again, first overall, second overall, third overall, because those gaps should be much bigger than, 201st, 202nd, 203rd, and so on. So what that gives you is draft capital actually correlates to a wide receiver's points per game in their first 3 years at 0.423 R squared, which sounds nerdy. I know R squared is just kind of like pretty crazy, but it's just how good is the correlation? How much does the inputs affect the outputs? That's about 42.3% of the time the draft capital will hit on target. Now, the RS grades, the new ones, hit 0.495, which to me is a meaningful enough step up on draft capital to care. Now, all of that's good and well. Let's get into these wide receivers. Now, if you're asking yourself, why 16? Well, I just got done with the Dynasty rookie rankings that I have out on the Patreon. You can find that patreon.com/Ron Stewart. I did my top 50. 16 wide receivers made the top 50. So we're going to talk about 16 wide receivers. Again, if you want my top 50 rookie rankings, if you want my 200 plus Dynasty rankings, if you want access to all of this prospect model talk that we just did, where you can look through my databases, my wide receiver model back to 2017, running back to 07, so on and so forth. All that can be found on the Patreon, patreon.com/Ron Stewart. But let's get into the actual players here. First up at wide receiver 16, and we're going to do this video a little bit differently. We're going to go back to front, because if I go front to back, I'm just going to talk a bunch about Travis Hunter again and Emeka Egbuka again and gush about all these guys. Let's get in the weeds here and talk first about my wide receiver 16, Savion Williams. He goes in the 3rd round to the Green Bay Packers, and this is what we're going to do for all of these wide receivers. We are going to put out their comps list. Pretty much the way that I did this is I broke down all of those inputs, right? Film score, breakout score, athleticism, efficiency score, everything that matters in the model. And I start to tweak up and down. I'm looking for players that match a similar body type and a similar athleticism, and then also a similar film score, a similar breakout score. And I try and get it to within, 5 to 10 players to give you a meaningful look at the ceiling and the floor, right? So as this sort of screenshot is shown here, DR is draft round, DP is draft pick, draft year, the player, the prospect tier. So bronze, I'll actually put this here so you guys can see it. Bronze, silver, elite, legendary, or bronze, silver, gold, elite, legendary. Number of 18 plus point per game seasons. That's like on average about like a wide receiver 1 season. 14 plus point per game seasons. That's about a wide receiver 2 season. The amount that these wide receivers averaged in their first 3 seasons in terms of points per game, their RS grade, their projected output, and then just the inputs. And then you'll have like some measurables and some other stuff I might include in each of these comps. So with Savion Williams, he's a very weird receiver. He has a lot of size, right? His height is 76 inches, so that's like 6'4", I believe, and he's 222 pounds. So he is huge. But as you can see, the rest of this, we're talking an F breakout score, a C- efficiency score. Pretty much what he's giving you is round 3 draft capital, size, and athleticism. And that puts him into a range of, yes, Chase Claypool being the ceiling, but then you're also talking about Miles Boykin and Jonathan Mingo and Jalen Hurd. And he's a really interesting prospect. Okay, we're talking wide receiver 16. This is kind of it's not going to be pretty in this range, but I'm trying to keep it realistic. He is interesting. Savion Williams, to me, does have some upside, okay? I know that this list is grim, but he's 23 years old. That's going to ding him. He only has 1,655 receiving yards over his 5-year career at TCU, but there's some upside here. He's 6'4", 222 pounds, and that's why he gets that like Claypool comp. It's why he gets a Jalen Hurd comp, and he kind of looks like a Cordarrelle Patterson, where he's big, he runs a 4.48, and over his entire college career, he actually had 62 carries for 384 rushing yards and 6 rushing touchdowns. And what you're really hoping for here is, yes, maybe he develops into being a real wide receiver, a full-time wide receiver. But the more likely scenario is you draft him, you stash him on your taxi squad, and in like year 3, they say, screw it, we're going to put this guy at running back, and all of a sudden you have, a Cordarrelle Patterson on the Falcons situation, a Ty Montgomery, and Antonio Gibson, a Tyrone Tracy last year, one of these wide receiver to running back converts who are efficient enough on the ground, but then also can rack up 50-plus catches and be monsters in PPR leagues. But I will say there still is some upside for him to be a pure wide receiver. This is like, this is a very long shot is how I'll put it when it comes to Savion Williams, but he does fit this range where if you sort by contested catch rate with minimum 10 or more contested catches in your college career, he has the best rate in my entire database. He is catching contested catch balls 75% of the time. And it's not just like a small sample. He has 27 contested catches on 36 opportunities. So really good hands, but I've seen film guys say he has like dumb drops. He's one of these really weird and like all over the place players. And then on top of like crazy contested catch scores, he has a 27% missed tackles forced per reception rate, one of the best on this entire list. So he's making people miss. He's great at the catch point, but he's not producing. He's an older prospect. He's likely much better as a running back hybrid kind of guy, but that's interesting to me. So he gets day 2 draft capital. He's going to be paired up with Jordan Love and Matt LaFleur. And you assume that if Matt LaFleur drafts him, that they have a plan in place. Now, next up, we have Elic Ayomanor as our wide receiver 15. And I will say, we're doing this backwards, and I didn't mention what the tiers are. These are guys that I'm taking in the 3rd round of rookie drafts, and after that it'll be 2nd round of rookie drafts, then 1-2 turn, mid to late 1st, early 1st of rookie drafts. So this is actually 3rd plus. So these guys, Savion Williams is probably more like a 4th round rookie pick for me. Elic Ayomanor probably more like a 3-4 turn, but you get what I'm saying. These are dart throws essentially. Elic Ayomanor, our wide receiver 15. These are the comps they spit out for him. It's not great, right? And I included this time his usage, his contested target percentage. So again, it's just your percentage of targets that are contested. That's not a good thing. You don't want a lot of your targets to be contested. You want to get open, create separation. And his 26% mark falls in this range of a, Seth Williams. I guess like Kenny Golladay, but he's a little bit lower. Gabe Davis, but he's a little bit lower. Anything over 25% is a little bit concerning. And then he also wasn't efficient, right? D+ efficiency score. Pretty much what he is 6'2", 206 pounds. He's athletic. He broke out somewhat early. And that's really it. At the end of the day, he is a day 3 pick, and we do have to remember what these hit rates look like, right? When we get to round 4, things get really tough. I included the wide receiver hit rates by round from 2017 to 2022. You can see 1st round is great, then 2nd and 3rd round is okay, and then 4th round it falls off a cliff, where only 4.2% of these wide receivers are hitting a 14+ point per game season, and that's unfortunately where Ayomanor falls. 4th round, 136 overall, to the Titans. But I'm comfortable ranking him ahead of Savion Williams, who goes round 3 for this reason. Savion Williams is a bronze 3rd round wide receiver prospect. This is your bucket of 3rd round bronze receivers. None of them have done anything. You do have like Josh Palmer as your best outcome here, but it's Amari Rodgers, Miles Boykin, Devin Duvernay. Nothing great. That's where Savion Williams falls into, and then also Ty Felton. Now, when it comes to Ayomanor, his upside is this athletic X-receiver like a Gabe Davis, a Kenny Golladay, but more likely than not, it's probably going to be pretty rough. He is one of these guys that falls on day 3, and that's usually not a profile worth really chasing when you just look at day 3 wide receivers who were also early declares. And this is a trap, in my opinion, where in the past, I'd be like, the analytics look good, they declared early, but that's only a 2% input in the model. It's really not a huge deal in the NIL era. And outside of Amon-Ra St. Brown, there really haven't been any huge hits here. Now, of course, like Gabe Davis was pretty solid for a minute there. Isaiah Hodgins had a second. Kiki QT had a second. But overall, Gabe Davis had a little, run there, but it's not an amazing list unless if you're sure that he's Amon-Ra St. Brown. I am never going to really make that bet that he's going to be Amon-Ra St. Brown, and just puts you in this list of guys who are just fine, right? Like Troy Franklin last year, where he looked really good on paper, then he falls during the draft, and then people still chase after him, which I was one of them. I still like Troy Franklin, and very rarely does this work out, and very rarely should we be putting them over good prospects drafted on day 2. Again, I'm fine putting him over a guy like Savion Williams, who's a bronze, but this is about as high as I can go with Ayomanor. He also flunked reception perception, only in the 21st percentile versus zone, 35th versus press, which isn't good for a perimeter X receiver. So he just scares me. I know the situation is good, right? This is somebody that we thought would get drafted on day 2. Then he falls. A lot of people are still firm in his talent that he's a good receiver. And then also he goes to a pretty wide open receiver room. You have Calvin Ridley, and then that's kind of it as it pertains to Elic Ayomanor. So he does have the opportunity to go out there and produce, but the profile is definitely a little bit shaky. Again, that comps list, it goes down to, I actually think Seth Williams is a great comp as a contested catch receiver that fell on draft day. Ayomanor did something similar. And the upside is Gabe Davis, Kenny Golladay. Then we have wide receiver Tory Horton. He goes in the 5th round to the Seattle Seahawks. Another day 3 wide receiver that we are disrespecting Savion Williams day 2 draft capital for. But again, I'm fine passing on Savion Williams. At the end of the day, Tory Horton and Ayomanor are shaky bets. I prefer Tory Horton, who to me is the better player. He is the highest graded silver wide receiver in this class that didn't get day 2 or better draft capital. And his comps are a little bit more favorable, right? He has Romeo Doubs as an outcome. He has Josh Reynolds, who wasn't great, but he was an NFL receiver. And when we get to the day 3 category, that's pretty solid. Now, when you look at what Tory Horton's profile looks like, a B+ breakout score is great. He had 2 separate seasons of 1,000+ receiving yards. He actually broke out early at Nevada next to Romeo Doubs and Cole Turner there, who were both 2 NFL players, Doubs being a productive NFL player. He wasn't super efficient, only a C+ efficiency score. That gets him more in the range with a guy like Romeo Doubs, and then he does come in at 6'1", 196 pounds, 4.4 speed, and he is somebody that did look really good in reception perception, where he had the 94th percentile win rate against press coverage, which is huge because he comes into a spot in Seattle where, of course, they have slot receivers in JSN, in Cooper Kupp. MVS, definitely a perimeter guy, but not like a pure X. He's more of your flanker role. He's going to come into a wide receiver room that needs a perimeter wide receiver that can line up, beat press coverage, and that's what Tory Horton does best. So this is definitely aggressive for a day 3 receiver, but Tory Horton has always been a my guy for me. And if I can get him in like the 4th round of rookie drafts, I'm definitely very much interested on taking a flyer with him. Now, our wide receiver 13 is going to be Pat Bryant. He goes round 3 to the Denver Broncos. And this one is interesting. I'll be honest, Pat Bryant, before getting day 2 draft capital, was really not on my radar. I wasn't all that interested. I know he was like maybe, consensus like wide receiver 20 or whatever, but now post-draft, he's my wide receiver 13. He gets drafted somewhat high here, and his comps list isn't amazing, right? Like his ceiling here is kind of like Cedric Tillman, but I don't hate this brand of receiver, right? We're talking big, 6'2", 204 pounds, decent efficiency with a B- efficiency rating. You can also look at his passer rating when targeted. It was 140 in his final season. That's a really, really high score. So he was efficient. He has size. He gets drafted highly. And then he's also a Sean Payton guy. Sean Payton, now, do not run wild with this quote, okay? I am not saying Pat Bryant will be the next Michael Thomas. It's just that when Sean Payton likes somebody, it means they're going to get on the field and they're going to get used, which is a huge deal, right? Last year, Devon Vele was fantasy relevant and Lil Jordan Humphrey was running routes, and Sean Payton just has guys that he likes, and if you can kind of get in with the popular crowd, all of a sudden you matter in fantasy football. And I think that's what Pat Bryant can be. I don't know what his ceiling is, but I will say this hit rate bucket of round 3 silver receivers is much better than I thought it would be. You have hits like Nico Collins, Terry McLaurin, Deontay Johnson, Tank Dell, Michael Gallup, Kenny Golladay. You have a lot of whiffs, but you even have some like in-between guys like Cedric Tillman has shown flashes, Jalen McMillan has shown flashes, and then that's kind of it. But we're talking about 3rd round receivers here. If we look at the hit rates from earlier, like if we can get, what's the percentage on it? So about like a quarter of them hit 14 plus point per game seasons. This is like in that range, right? So it's not terrible. There's some upside, right? Nico Collins, Terry McLaurin, Deontay Johnson. There is an outcome where Pat Bryant is the next Terry McLaurin, but that is his, that's his absolute ceiling. Most likely case scenario, he's kind of like, I actually think Traquan Smith and Jalen Tolbert are great like floor comps for him of just like fine perimeter wide receivers at the next level. This is somebody that's been comped to like Tim Patrick, and despite being a big body, Matt Harmon in his write-up for him kind of said that he's more of this like flanker slot, big flanker slot, kind of like a Tim Patrick. I'm trying to think of like other sort of comps like that, because you can get to like big slots, but then a lot of them are, Drake London, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and that's not really A.J. Brown as well. That's not where Pat Bryant is living. It's really much more of like a serviceable big receiver in the NFL. I think that Tim Patrick's kind of perfect for that. Now, let's get to our wide receiver 12 here. We have Isaac Tesla. This is another one that I had no intention on being high on pre-draft, but he comes out here and he actually looks pretty good. He gets a 6.4 RS grade, which is the highest among the round 3 receivers in this class. He crushes athleticism, 9.93 RAS. He is 6'4", 6'3", 214 pounds, and that's what we'll start with him. He is a freak athlete. 6'3" and 5/8", 214 pounds, 17 reps on the bench press because why not? Almost a 40-inch vertical, 4.4 speed, and then also elite agility at 214 pounds, 6'3" is nuts. Now, of course, we've seen many of these guys. We've seen plenty of combine warriors come out here, look amazing, and then all of a sudden they are Stephen Hill. They are, name a bust who tested well. Brashad Perriman's another. John Ross breaks the 40 record. A lot of these guys don't end up doing anything, but I think if you're going to take a flyer on a guy, you want him to kind of be, 6'3", 214, 4.4 speed, super explosive, and then also elite in short area quickness. But he actually surprisingly gets an A- breakout score. Now, if you look up his stats, there's really not much to show for. He only has, I think, just over 1,000 total receiving yards in the SEC. Pretty much what he did is he played his first 3 years at a D2 school called Hillsdale. Then his year 4 and 5 was at Arkansas, which they were kind of up and down. They were fine. But his breakout score only includes those first 3 years, and they are adjusted for strength of schedule. So he gets a pretty big ding for it being at a Division II school like Hillsdale. But in his final year, he had 68 catches for 1,325 yards and 13 touchdowns, which sounds fine. But in the context of receiving yards per team pass attempt on a team that passed for 2,186 yards total and 18 touchdowns, that's pretty nuts. So he had 1,300 of 2,100 total receiving yards. That's 60% of the passing offense was Isaac Tesla. He was a monster. He had over 120 receiving yards per game. Those are Cooper Kupp, Eastern Washington type of numbers that he was putting up there. Now, what I will say is you'll see in the comps list here, we have Zay Jones, Rashee Rice, Bryan Edwards, and these guys all had 20% or more of their career production coming from deep slot and screen targets. Now, that's going to be Ron, who even cares? That's that number on the end, right? He had 45% of his career production came from deep slot and screen targets, and that's kind of junk volume. This is a stat from Scott Barrett where you can look at receivers, their biggest percentage of yards gained on screens and deep slot targets. Deep slot is just 20 yards or further downfield out of the slot. Screens is pretty self-explanatory, and it's really just to sort of filter out guys like Jalen Hyatt and Malachi Corley who kind of are on this list. Tutu Atwell, Luther Burden, who's in this draft class, we'll talk about later, Wan'Dale Robinson, Treylon Burks. It's a lot of, duds, and it's pretty much just that style of production is shaky and gimmicky and gadgety, which is definitely a concern. But when we're talking about wide receiver 12, somebody you're getting in the 3rd round or 4th round of rookie drafts, I'm down to bet on the upside, right? He produced early. He is a freak athlete. And the Detroit Lions drafted him 70th overall, which is pretty nuts. I will say him being a gadgety 68% slot guy isn't great for a team that already has Amon-Ra St. Brown, but you just kind of trust with the Detroit Lions. They've been very good at drafting receivers or just drafting in general, right? Jahmyr Gibbs, they drafted Laporta, they drafted Jameson Williams, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Brad Holmes knows what he's doing. If he takes a guy 70th overall, this is me kind of trusting him. And then also trusting the model, which has him as a silver, a pretty high-end silver for a round 3 receiver. And then his range of outcomes is if he falls flat, he's like Zay Jones or Bryan Edwards. But his ceiling is kind of he looks a little bit like Rashee Rice, just in terms of usage, slot role, athleticism. All he really has going for him is early career production. But he's interesting, man. Again, I know athleticism doesn't really matter a ton for receivers, but if I'm going to bet on a shaky receiver, that's nuts, man. He is the 29th most athletic receiver since 1987. Now, moving on, let's get to Jalen Royals, my wide receiver 11 in this same tier. He goes to the Kansas City Chiefs on day 3. And he definitely is kind of bucking against draft capital for me. He is my highest ranked day 3 receiver. And with him, I'm fine taking the swing. One, because he's going to the Chiefs, right? He's going to get tied to Patrick Mahomes. That's exciting, especially on a team that doesn't have an outside receiver that can consistently win on the perimeter, right? Of course, they have Rashee Rice, who kicks a little bit more inside. Marquise Brown, who's not really a traditional X receiver. He's more of your flanker type. Xavier Worthy, similar deal. They don't have a big X receiver. And that's what Jalen Royals can offer you. He's 6 foot, 205 pounds, contested catch receiver. He falls to round 4. But I'm fine overdrafting him for landing spot when we're talking about, again, like a third round rookie pick. That's absolutely fine by me. He comes in as a silver. His comps are Chad Hansen, Javon Baker, and then his ceiling is Terry McLaurin. Now, I will say Terry McLaurin is a day 2 pick, and his program quality, which I left in, is an A compared to Jalen Royals D at Utah State. So Terry McLaurin is being very, very generous, but that's what he can be at his absolute ceiling. His floor is non-existent, but I'm fine taking the swing here, especially because he does have a really interesting profile, where if you look at day 3 receivers sorted by efficiency score, he's one of 10 or so that have a 7 or better efficiency score based on yards per out run, passer rating when targeted, PFF grade. And there's some good names on this list. Like D.D. Westbrook had a run. Of course, Puka Nacua is on here. Outside of that, it gets pretty rough, but he is also in this range of 64% contested catch rate, which is really high, and then a 26% missed tackles forced per reception rate. So he makes people miss. He's good at contested catches, and then he's also efficient. So I'm cool with all of that across the board. He also tested pretty well for his size. He's big, fast, good in contested catch situations, and has some underlying efficiency that I'm willing to bet on for a shaky day 3 bet. Now, our first receiver that goes into the second round tier is our wide receiver 10, Jaylin Noel. And his comps look like this. They're pretty solid. He gets Christian Kirk, Curtis Samuel on the high end. On the lower end, Malachi Corley, Antonio Callaway, Anthony Schwartz is another one if you remember that name. Jayden Reed is another kind of like ceiling comp for him. And he comes out as somebody that gets drafted on day 2. He produced early on in his career. He's super athletic, but then he's not very efficient. He plays a lot in the slot, and that kind of gives you some decent comps here. And again, he is another one of these silver wide receivers drafted in round 3 that have a pretty solid hit rate. And when you look at kind of what he can do, he's going to be operating out of the slot, downfield, and he's gotten comps before. Like I think Christian Kirk's a good comp, like we just said. I've heard as well like a Tyler Lockett, and he just gets open. This is his reception perception success by route. He gets open pretty much everywhere besides curl, and like 9 routes are still yellow. He gets open, he creates separation. To me, he's just like a very high floor wide receiver prospect, and now he's tied to CJ Stroud. We'll see kind of how he gets on the field, right? They already have Christian Kirk. They drafted Jayden Higgins before him. I don't know how he fits in, but he's going to be tied to CJ Stroud, and he's a good player, and to me, that's exciting. Then we have our wide receiver 9 here, and that's going to be Kyle Williams. He goes 3rd round to the Patriots, and if there's going to be a second coming of Deontay Johnson, it is Kyle Williams. Now, of course, the downside is Kayshon Boutte, Danny Gray, Antonio Callaway, but he is this guy who has a B-plus breakout score, which is really, really good for a silver wide receiver prospect. He has some athleticism. He's 5'11", 190, and the film guys absolutely love him. The film guys love him. This is from Mike Renner. Kyle Williams is the best pure separator in the draft class. Couldn't love that pick more for Drake May. And then Football Insights, college players at 4+ yards per out run and no drops versus man coverage last year per PFF. Kyle Williams and Jeremiah Smith. That's really good company. Pretty much he is shredding man coverage. He's being super efficient versus man coverage. He has really good hands. Like I said, the film guys love him. He can get open everywhere. And when we look at his early season production, right, you have B-plus breakout scores. This is somebody, despite spending 5 years in college, did produce early in school. And what that's from is this first year he was at UNLV. Now, they only had 6 games because of COVID, but he had 71 yards per game and was pretty much the top dog in this passing game despite a COVID year, him being a freshman, and that goes a long way. That puts him in this bucket of players to have a 2+ yards per team pass attempt in their first season of college. I posted this on Twitter and people were going crazy saying like this is a bad list to be a part of. He's a round 3 receiver. Again, like if he's anything, when we look at these hit rate buckets, if he's anything, that is a huge win, right? Like, why can't I pull this up? Like, round 3 receivers average 5.5 points per game through their first 3 seasons. If you can get your round 3 receiver to have Calvin Ridley, Marquise Brown, Christian Kirk, Jayden Reed, Xavier Worthy as ceiling outcomes, to me, that's a massive W. So I think we have to kind of recalibrate expectations here. He's really solid. He can play inside and out. He has the opportunity to be the Patriots' #1 target right away. He's going to be tied to Drake May, which I'm excited about. And Kyle Williams is somebody that I keep warming up to and moving up in my rankings because He looks good by the numbers, and the film guys absolutely love him. Then at wide receiver 8, we have Jack Bech. He's another one of these guys that's interesting, where you kind of just have to trust what the film guys are saying. His numbers aren't amazing, right? You look here, D breakout score, so he's not really producing early, but he does get round 2 draft capital. This is where we're getting into the wide receivers who were drafted in the second round of the draft. That is a huge deal, but his efficiency score is not great. His breakout score is not great. He's essentially draft capital, and he's athleticism, where he's big, 6'1", 214 pounds. And he's really interesting, Jack Bech, because if you dig deeper than just early career production and his yards per out run, he has some stuff you can latch on to. Now, I think the first thing you got to talk about with Jack Bech is he has a really weird usage profile. As a freshman at LSU, he took 25% of his snaps as an inline tight end. Then he's had seasons as high as 95% in the slot and as low as 26.8% in the slot. So he can play inside, he can play inside and out, he can play in the slot. He can also kick inside the tight end if you need him. I don't know why you would need a tight end wide receiver hybrid, but it's interesting in terms of the versatility and the multiple kind of personnel and formation groupings you can use with him. And he gets open. He's good at all 3 phases of the route, which to me is something that I'm always looking for with receivers. We look at his reception perception. He's in the 85th percentile versus man, 60th percentile versus zone, 91st percentile versus press. At the catch, 61.8% contested catch rate, 93rd percentile. After the catch, 96th percentile missed tackles forced per reception, 30.1%. So if you're not going to produce early and you're not going to be super efficient, give me some underlying metrics like this. Give me some weird versatility usage, and then also give me round 2 to the Raiders, right? He'll have he'll have a chance to make an impact as soon as year 1. Geno Smith should make this passing offense much better than it's been in years past. Outside of Bowers, outside of Jacoby Myers, it's pretty dry in that receiver room. And for that reason, Mike Clay actually has Jack Bech as his wide receiver 57 in his initial run of rookie year projections, which is actually ahead of Emeka Egbuka, ahead of Luther Burden, ahead of Jayden Higgins, ahead of Tre Harris, guys who are all ranked ahead of him in Dynasty. Now, of course, year 1 production isn't the end-all be-all, but especially for a receiver this late in your rookie drafts, people to say he's going to get on the field and make an impact early, I think that is huge. Now, he's actually going at wide receiver 66 over on Underdog. Mike Clay has him higher than that. And if you want to get in on the fun, make sure you check out Underdog. They have drafts going on already where you can just get straight into these. You can get into Best Ball Mania. You can do higher or lower for the NBA playoffs, where you can get a free pick if you're a new customer. You have the Luka Doncic free pick. I think that's pretty much running the entirety of the playoffs. Again, you have Best Ball Mania if you want to get in there. We're going to start streaming those very soon. And guys like Jack Bech are probably going too cheap. So you can get in there and start drafting some rookies all summer long. Use promo code RON and they'll match your first deposit up to $1,000. You can find that in the link in the description and the comment section down below. Now let's get into our wide receiver 7. We have Tre Harris. He goes second round to the Chargers, and his comps are all over the place. He gets Christian Watson, Cedric Tillman, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, and Terry McLaurin. You'll see a common theme with Terry McLaurin is that if you are a contested catch guy, right, Tre Harris has 28% of his targets in college coming in contested catch situations. When that happens, you're going to fall somewhere between J.J. Arcega-Whiteside and Terry McLaurin. That is a huge discrepancy, right? And that's kind of what Tre Harris is about. He could either be amazing or he could be an absolute bust of an early to mid second round rookie pick. But that's kind of the excitement of Tre Harris. He gets attached to Justin Herbert. He's one of these contested catch 50-50 ball guys, and that's kind of perfect for Justin Herbert, who has been looking for that on the perimeter for a while now. Now, here's the thing with him that does concern me. When we look at wide receivers that have a 25% or higher contested target rate, so these are guys who are over a quarter of their targets are coming in contested catch situations, he has a 48.4% contested catch rate. That is, if you'd want that to be above 50%, and then also everything below him are all duds, right? Everything above him, you have T. Higgins, you have Terry McLaurin, you have Nico Collins. Below Tre Harris, you're looking at Akeem Butler. Elic Ayomanor's in there too, but you're looking at Akeem Butler, David Bell, we don't know what's going on with Keon Coleman just yet in his career. There's not a lot of hits, right? If you're going to be a contested catch guy, I would prefer you to be good at contested catches. So that's what's my concern with Tre Harris. Now, the other thing is you'll see with his comps is his breakout score is bad. So he didn't produce early. He's a 5-year guy, but he was super efficient. A- efficiency score is super impressive. Now, of course, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside had a similar efficiency score here. But if we look at wide receivers drafted in round 2 with a career yards per out run of 3 or better, it is Laviska Shenault, Anthony Miller, Dwayne Eskridge, Tre Harris, and T. Higgins. So I think that kind of encapsulates perfectly what Tre Harris is. I think most outcomes, he is J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. He is, a complete bust. He is Laviska Shenault. But I think that there is like a 90th percentile outcome where he is Terry McLaurin, T. Higgins, Nico Collins, one of these really good contested catch ball guys, and he'd be attached to Justin Herbert. So I think that ceiling alone is worth chasing in the early to mid second. I just want to let you guys know, like, the ceiling is amazing. The floor is nothing when it comes to Tre Harris. Now, our wide receiver 6 on this list, we have Jayden Higgins. He goes really early round 2 to the Houston Texans. And this is what the model spits out for him. He gets really good comps when it comes to gold receivers drafted in that sweet spot of like just before the 41st pick. You have Michael Pittman and you have Courtland Sutton. Now, if you wanted to, you could just cut off the comps there, especially a guy like Courtland Sutton where they both have like 22%, 23% of their targets coming in contested catch situations. But if you wanted to expand that to silver receivers, you start to get to Denzel Mims, Alec Pierce, Brian Edwards, but you do get the upside of a Nico Collins. And he is, again, one of these big X receivers. He's big, fast, A-plus adjusted athleticism. He's also a good breakout scorer and a good efficiency score guy where he's efficient on his routes, and then he also produced early. He's attached to C.J. Stroud. And really my only hang-up with him and the only red flag I can find is Matt Harmon's reception perception, where he's like red across the board, he's brutal, and Matt Harmon wants him to kick inside to be a big slot. The issue is that they already have Christian Kirk on this roster, and they also drafted Jaylin Noel, who we talked about earlier, who is a mainly slot. 70% plus of his snaps in college came in the slot. So it seems like they drafted Higgins to be an outside receiver. I'd be shocked if they kick him inside, and then to me, that becomes concerning, where you have a guy that people are concerned whether or not he can win on the outside with no opportunity to kick inside and have some versatility. We'll see how it goes. He's here because he's gold, and Sutton, Pittman are great comps, but if you dig a little bit deeper, there is definitely some red flags with Jayden Higgins. Now, moving on from that, we have our 1-2 turn receivers here. And this is where we get Matthew Golden as my wide receiver 5. And he is a gold in the prospect model. Here are his comps. His breakout score is a B, so he's like early career production, really not that great. The only one with worse early career production on this list is Jameson Williams. C+ efficiency score is in this range of Jahan Dotson, Zay Flowers, Xavier Worthy, but all of these guys had a B+ or better breakout score. So I'm being very generous with these comps, right? Because they either have one or the other, all of these receivers. They either have a B+ or better breakout score, or they have an A- or better efficiency score. Matthew Golden has neither, and that is very concerning. He is essentially drafted off of the film. He is one of these guys like a Henry Ruggs, like a Jahan Dotson, I guess a little bit like Jameson Williams, but he did have that peak season at Alabama in his final year, that are just like drafted off of their tape, their film, their upside, them being early declares, going to big schools like Texas. And for me, that's concerning, right? We'll talk about his fit and his landing spot in a second because people are going crazy about him going to the Packers. But he goes into this list of guys that didn't really produce early on in their careers that got drafted highly. If we look at wide receivers drafted in the first round, and we sort them by their peak yards per team pass attempt season over their first 3 years. So that's actually helping Matthew Golden. If I did it years 1 through 8, over an entire wide receiver's career, that opens them up to Legette's final year, Kadarius Toney's final year, and a lot of these like super seniors, and Devontae Smith's great Heisman year. It's just the first 3 seasons, and still the only wide receivers that were worse, Xavier Legette, Kadarius Toney, John Ross, and then Ricky Pearsall, Henry Ruggs, and Matthew Golden are all the only 6 wide receivers to not hit a 2 or better receiving yards per team pass attempt over their first 3 seasons, and that's concerning. Now, if you're going to be that and you're going to get drafted off of your route running, I need you to do better than a 45th percentile against man and 50th percentile versus press on reception perception. So that's where it all gets really tricky for me, where he's not like a clear technician. It's almost like he's getting drafted for his college football playoff run and then running a 4.29 at the combine. And to me, that's really concerning. Now, he does fit really well with the Packers, right? They draft him in the first round, which is a huge deal. This is a team that does not draft wide receivers in the first round. They finally said, you know what? We need one of these guys. We need a pure separator for Jordan Love. So to me, that's interesting, right? He's attached to Jordan Love. He has Matt LaFleur. It should be a good offense. Matt LaFleur always has a good offense, but it has been more run heavy, and he has rotated these receivers a ton. So there is the downside that Matthew Golden never gets up to like 80% plus of the routes, or, you know, maybe if you want to put that higher to like 90% plus of the routes, maybe that happens. But to me, it's a fine landing spot. It's not an amazing landing spot, but I'm not going to sit here and say it's like super crowded, right? Like Jaden Reed hasn't really shown much. Christian Watson has the torn ACL. Romeo Dobbs hasn't really shown much either. So it's a fine landing spot. I just don't really get crazy about landing spots, especially when it comes to wide receivers. And this is why. Let's talk about my wide receiver 4, Luther Burden, and I'll kind of get into it. Now, I already had this spiel on the top 25 video, but when it comes to Dynasty, landing spot isn't everything. And it's so crazy how much landing spot is affecting everybody's rankings. Of course, it matters. But first and foremost, it is the player good? Then it's draft capital, right? Did he get drafted first round? Did he get drafted top 10? Did he get drafted in the third round? And then it's landing spot. I think we really get draft capital and landing spot almost flipped there. We're wondering, you know, how is he going to get on the field? How's he going to get routes? How's he going to get targets? The thing is, NFL, the situations are so fluid. They are so fluid. Players change teams all the time. Trades happen. Players get hurt. And when you talk about Luther Burden, his landing spot with the Bears, there's no guarantee that DJ Moore doesn't get traded. Ben Johnson came out to the media and almost called him out in a way where if you're not getting the ball, you need to block and do your job. And that's something that DJ Moore famously didn't do last year. And then also Rome Odunze. He didn't really show us anything last year. He had under a 1.2 yards per out run. There is no guarantee that Rome Odunze is good, right? A lot of these players, they bust. Like Rome Odunze could bust. DJ Moore could not be on the team long term. We don't know. Like there's so much up in the air, and at wide receiver, it's so much of a skill-based position where it's not running back, right? You don't need the opportunity. You don't need to be the only running back on the field to get that carry. If you're a receiver, you can be one of 3 or 4 or 5 receivers in a passing play formation, and all you got to do is get open and get the ball. Like you can earn your opportunity, and that's what I think Luther Burden can do. This is also a guy in Ben Johnson who loves using guys like Burden, like Jameson Williams that are electric with the ball in their hands, and then also a slot like Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Luther Burden kind of has the overlap of those two players bundled up into one. And when you look at kind of in the past, landing spot's great, but like overrating Xavier Worthy to the Chiefs would have led you to ranking him over Brian Thomas Jr. and Brock Bowers last year. Paris Campbell over A.J. Brown. People forget Paris Campbell walked into a wide open Colts room with Andrew Luck at quarterback. Everyone went crazy about it. A.J. Brown went to a Titans team that was kind of ugly. Mariota was kind of on the outs. It was a run-first offense with Derrick Henry. Nobody was all that interested. CH over JT. Chiefs again. Jalen Reagor over Justin Jefferson. Jefferson was going to have to sit behind Adam Thielen, and Reagor had the wide receiver room to himself, and Carson Wentz was this great quarterback, and things change. And then Sky Moore over Olave. Again, the Chiefs thing. So it's just like, even if you walk into the Kansas City Chiefs and there's no receivers there to compete with you, it doesn't mean anything. Wide receiver, you have to earn your targets. It's not like running back where you just get the carries because you're first on the depth chart. You have to earn your targets. So even being in a wide open receiver room doesn't guarantee you're going to work out. So with wide receivers especially, I don't really rate landing spot that highly. Like to me, it's draft capital and player talent. And when it comes to Luther Burden, I want to bet on his talent. Matthew Golden, we just went through, doesn't really have any early season production, doesn't really have anything to hang your hat on. Luther Burden's range of outcomes are great. Now, of course, they're very wide, right? Guys on this list include Zay Jones, Sky Moore, Jalen Reagor. He could be brutal. But the upside of Luther Burden, who is like 6 foot, 200 pounds, ran well, is guys like Malik Neighbors, guys like DJ Moore, Chris Godwin, Ayuk, Rashee Rice, Juju Smith-Schuster. And you can see A- breakout score. That is really good. He produced early. He had that monster year 2 season. He wasn't super efficient, but then he also gets a great film score. And here's why. Part of my film score is Lance Zierlein's NFL.com grades. And he is one of these guys that pretty much Lance Zierlein had a round 1 grade on that fell to the round 2. And historically speaking, that has been a great bet to make. in terms of guys to have a 6.36 or better land zero line grade, right? If you just there's so few stats where you can go to round 2 receivers, sort by the best ones, and then all of a sudden you have this list of DK Metcalf, AJ Brown, Paris Campbell, and Elijah Moore are duds, but then you get Deebo Samuel, Ladd McConkey, Michael Pittman, T. Higgins. So that is 6 of 8, 75% hit rate, which for round 2 receivers, if we go back up to the top again here, round 2 receivers, you're talking 28.6% is your implied hit rate of a 14-plus point per game season. For this list, Metcalf has hit one, AJ Brown has hit one, Deebo has hit one, Ladd has hit one, Pittman has hit one, and T. Higgins has hit one. So that is 6 out of 8, which is nuts for round 2 receivers. So I just want to bet on that. I want to bet on his monster year 2. I want to bet on his over 30% missed tackles forced per reception, him being electric, him being in this offense with Ben Johnson. And you can say whatever you want. I know it's crowded, but it's crowded right now, right? There's a chance that Loveland sucks. There's a chance that Rome Odunze busts. There's a chance that DJ Moore is not long for this team. And I just want a good player attached to Caleb Williams and Ben Johnson. That's where I'm at on Luther Burden. It's why he's my wide receiver 4. I seem to be on an island with ranking him over Matthew Golden, and it sucks to see. There were a lot of, brothers in arms that had Luther Burden as like wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 pre-draft, and then post-draft, they've all moved him behind Matthew Golden. I will be holding strong. I will be holding down the fort. Luther Burden over Matthew Golden for me, and let's actually make that official here. I forgot to swap them, but we have Luther Burden there, and I will go over them real quick before we get to the next receiver, just so we kind of, it's a little bit confusing, but we have Savion Williams, wide receiver 16, Ayomanor 15, Horton 14, Bryant 13, Tesla 12, Royals 11, Noel 10, Williams 9, Besh 8, Harris 7, Higgins 6, Golden 5, Burden 4, and then at wide receiver 3 in the mid to late tier, just ahead, is going to be Emeka Egbuka, and he is the only other elite wide receiver prospect on this list besides Travis Hunter, and that's why to me he's in a tier above Luther Burden and Matthew Golden. He grades out as an elite, which is just a really good hit rate to be a part of, right? Elite wide receivers hit 14-plus point per game seasons 85% of the time, and they average 13.3 points per game through their first 3 seasons. That's a really good hit rate bucket to be a part of. Now, you look at his numbers across the board, his comps are great, right? Judy, JSN, Olave, Juju Smith-Schuster, Chris Godwin, Amon-Ra St. Brown as these like power slots who are athletic. And he does well across the board, right? Great breakout score, great athleticism, great efficiency score. All he doesn't have is early declare status, and I think in this modern NFL, that doesn't matter a ton. And he's very similar to Luther Burden in that, yes, the Bucs have Mike Evans. They have Chris Godwin. They have Jalen McMillan behind him, and it looks really crowded at first. But Mike Evans is getting older. Chris Godwin's coming off a major injury. Jalen McMillan kind of had his stats pumped up by touchdowns last year, and there was a stretch of games where even Mike Evans wasn't in, and Jalen McMillan didn't really do a ton. And I just think I want good players attached to good teams. The Bucs have been good, especially under Jason Licht at GM. Baker Mayfield's been good. He's shown that he can produce even without high-end OCs, right? They had one plucked off last year. Liam Cohen's now gone as well, and just going to be fine, right? Like Canales gets plucked to the Panthers. Cohen gets plucked to the Jaguars now. He's going to be fine. This team scores points. They have a good offense. So Emeka Egbuka, I'm just confident in, especially if the Bucs give him their vote of confidence. And funny enough, Egbuka has been used to producing next to NFL receivers, right? Marvin Harrison Jr., Jeremiah Smith, Olave, Garrett Wilson, JSN. You go through the whole list. He's done it in the past. He'll do it again. To me, just a very clear next level projection. Then our next receiver we have here is going to be Tet Mcmillan at wide receiver 2. He just barely misses the gold threshold. Just barely. And I will say, again, the thresholds are there, but they're also subjective, right? Like you're just making thresholds based on kind of like what these clusters look like. At the end of the day, Tet Mcmillan is 8.49. He is within a 10th of being an elite wide receiver prospect. That's why I gave him, Drake London's in here, Marvin Harrison Jr. is in here, of these guys that have great breakout scores, right? A+ breakout score. He produced early on. B- efficiency is kind of shaky. It's okay, but it puts him in this range of Drake London, of Marvin Harrison Jr. He does have 24% of his targets coming in contested catch situations, but that's around where Marvin Harrison Jr. is. It's around where Mike Williams was. It's around where Drake London was. Now, Drake London down to 20%, but still similar style of receiver, and he definitely is in that same mold of Drake London where he can play inside and out. He had like roughly a quarter of his snaps out of the slot in college. So he's exciting. He goes to Carolina. Canales is there. Bryce Young has some upside to take a next step forward, and him getting top 10 draft capital really locked in, these range of outcomes of like a Marvin Harrison Jr., of a Drake London. There was some downside. He could go in the 20s. Of course, he does have downside risk of like Treylon Burks, but because he went top 10, to me, I think the floor is really solidified here with Tet McMillan. Then our first wide receiver here, the wide receiver 1, we have Travis Hunter. This is just what it is. Now, his comps aren't even as sexy as Tet McMillan's, but it's because it's just tough to find comps for a guy who played so much on the defensive side of the ball. It's going to ding him in breakout score, and you can't really find anything that like accurately comps him because he is a unicorn. He is one of one. But, I think Devontae Smith is kind of like his floor, right? Devontae Smith next to A.J. Brown. You have Travis Hunter next to Brian Thomas Jr. as kind of like the 1B. I think his true upside is like Justin Jefferson, monster, one of the 3 best players at wide receiver in the NFL. And here's why. He's great at all 3 phases. In terms of reception perception, he is 92nd percentile versus man, 97th versus zone, 97th versus press. He's in the 95th percentile in terms of contested catch rate, with 63% of his contested catches being caught. And then 94th percentile missed tackles forced per reception with a 27.7% mark. He is good at all 3 levels. He's amazing. Gets drafted 2nd overall. Liam Cohen pays a king's ransom. He's an offensive-minded coach, and now he has Trevor Lawrence as his quarterback, which is all very exciting. Now, that is going to do it for our top 16 rookie wide receivers in this 2025 class. I will say, we'll look at this last second here. This is draft class quality. So if we take your elites, gold, silvers for every single class, and I put together a score. Pretty much like if you get a legendary, you get a 10. If you get an elite, you get 8.5, just based on your 14 plus point per game hit rates, right? So 10, 8.5, 4.5, 1.4, and then 0.2 for bronzes. But we didn't include any bronzes because that is, the bottom of the barrel. And 2025 comes in 6th of 9 draft classes in my database, pretty much like average or below average, which is fine. It's weird that it has the most silver wide receiver prospects in my database, but that's really just because they're not good enough to separate up to gold and up to elite, which kind of sucks to see, but it's a fine wide receiver class. It's nothing crazy, but I think it is good to look through the lens of like, how does this compare to other classes? It's average to below average, which I think is just fine, especially given how good this running back class is. Now, that's going to do it for us today. Again, if you want access to my top 50 Dynasty rookie rankings, I should be expanding it out to like 60 plus very soon here. You can find that on the Patreon, patreon.com/Ron Stewart. You get my Dynasty rookie rankings, my startup rankings, you get my buy and sell trade targets, you get access to the premium side of the Discord, you get Patreon Dynasty leagues, you get access to my prospect models that go back to 2017 for the receivers, 07 for the running backs, quarterbacks, and tight ends. You can look through the RS grades for all players and all draft classes in my database. So you can find that patreon.com/Ron Stewart in the description and the comment section down below. But if you can't support there, just leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and I will see y'all in the next one.
Stones, like this froze, ice cold, ice around my body like